We are all wired to connect, to trust, and to build relationships. These evolutionary patterns have served us well over millennia. They allowed early humans to survive by forming tribes, sharing resources, and defending one another. But those same instincts can sometimes lead us into danger, especially when we misread others or overlook subtle emotional signals. One of the more destructive social dynamics we can encounter is envy, especially when paired with deceit. Envy, when left unchecked, can evolve into behavior that sabotages trust, fractures relationships, and erodes our well-being. And falsehood, when disguised as sincerity, becomes a mask that's often hard to detect unless we understand the underlying neurobiological and psychological cues. Recognizing envy and falsehood in others is not about becoming suspicious or cynical. It's about developing the cognitive and emotional acuity to sense when something is misaligned, when someone's words, facial expressions, or actions don't match the internal states they're projecting. And the good news is, this skill can be trained, just like any other function of the brain, by combining neuroscience, behavioral psychology, and some very practical observations. We can sharpen our perception in powerful ways. Let's begin with behavioral incongruence, one of the strongest cues of falsehood, whether it stems from envy or any other form of deception, is inconsistency between verbal and nonverbal communication. The prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for decision-making and intentional speech, can craft sentences with precision, but the limbic system, the emotional core of the brain, is much harder to regulate in the moment. So what often happens when someone is lying or masking envy is that their facial expressions, tone of voice, or gestures betray them. They might say, "I'm happy for you," while subtly tightening their jaw, avoiding eye contact, or letting a smirk escape that doesn't match the sentiment. If you begin to notice these mismatches, especially repeatedly, it's a sign that their outer expression doesn't match their inner state. Another powerful indicator is selective enthusiasm. When someone celebrates your small victories but disappears during your major breakthroughs, it's often because they can't emotionally tolerate your success. The dopamine reward circuits in our brain are sensitive to perceived hierarchies. If someone feels that your progress threatens their status or self-worth, they may subtly withhold support, mask their indifference, or offer praise that feels hollow. You can detect this by paying close attention to their energy and involvement across different contexts. Are they excited only when you're struggling or on their level? That's a cue that envy, not friendship, is driving their behavior. Subtle sabotage is another hallmark. Envy doesn't always appear in aggressive or overt actions. Often it comes in the form of passive resistance. Someone might forget to invite you to key events, delay returning important messages, or give you advice that seems helpful on the surface but subtly undermines your efforts. From a neurobiological perspective, this reflects a defense mechanism. When the brain feels threatened by another's success, it sometimes engages in covert competition rather than open confrontation. These micro-sabotages are often difficult to confront because they're ambiguous. But if a pattern emerges where someone's support repeatedly results in setbacks or confusion, it's worth considering whether envy is at play. You should also be attuned to the use of humor. While humor is essential in bonding and social interaction, it's also a common delivery mechanism for envy-laced falsehood. Sarcasm, when used excessively or directed at your achievements, can carry hidden barbs. Neuroscience shows that sarcasm requires the brain to process layered meanings, what's being said versus what's being implied. When someone routinely masks criticisms or jealousy under the guise of jokes, you're seeing an attempt to express hostility while maintaining plausible deniability. Pay attention to how often you're the target of these comments, especially in public settings. Another subtle cue lies in comparative language. People who are envious often can't help but compare themselves to you, sometimes indirectly. They may insert phrases like "must be nice," "if I had your connections," or "some people have all the luck." These statements reflect an internal narrative of resentment rather than admiration. They imply that your achievements are due to external advantages rather than earned merit. This language points to an underlying cognitive bias known as attribution error, where others attribute your success to luck but their own to effort. When someone repeatedly frames your life in this light, it's often not objective observation, it's envy in disguise. Let's talk about attention asymmetry, when someone only listens to you with half presence, quickly redirecting conversations back to themselves. They're not just being self-centered. They may be emotionally disengaged from your experience. Studies on social cognition show that true empathy activates the brain's mirror neuron systems, causing individuals to mimic expressions and engage with emotional content. When someone fails to reflect your emotional state or rapidly withdraws when you express positive developments, it's a neurological sign of disconnection. Envy disrupts empathy. It makes it difficult for a person to share in another's joy because it threatens their own sense of lack. It's also useful to observe how someone speaks about others behind their backs. If they consistently degrade or downplay other people's accomplishments, there's a strong likelihood they'll do the same to you. Envy rarely exists in isolation. It's often part of a broader behavioral pattern. If someone speaks ill of others who are successful or driven, you can safely assume they harbor similar feelings toward you, especially if you're achieving more than they are. From a neuropsychological angle, this stems from projection. They externalize their dissatisfaction by attacking others' progress, often without realizing it. Their critique of others is actually a reflection of their own insecurity. Another indicator is the timing and context of compliments. Envious individuals often offer praise only after you've faced a setback, or when they themselves are feeling elevated. They might congratulate you after a demotion, not a promotion. This isn't random. Research in affective neuroscience shows that individuals high in envy often feel threatened by others' highs and comforted by their lows. They may only feel emotionally safe enough to express kindness when your perceived status is beneath theirs. If the compliments always arrive when you're down, not when you're thriving, that's not support, that's Schadenfreude masked as sympathy. Consistency is also key. A person who is genuine, whether they're in a great place in life or not, shows a steady baseline of respect and presence. But those driven by envy often fluctuate dramatically. They may be warm and supportive one day, then cold or dismissive the next, depending on how your achievements make them feel. This inconsistency isn't just emotional volatility. It's often tied to internal comparisons and perceived competition. The human brain tracks social standing unconsciously via structures like the anterior cingulate cortex, and when those comparisons turn negative, it can alter how someone treats you. If you find yourself walking on eggshells, not knowing which version of someone you'll get based on your success level, envy is likely playing a role. Finally, it's worth noting the absence of genuine curiosity. When someone truly values and respects you, they ask questions, not just surface-level ones, but deeper inquiries about your thoughts, experiences, and aspirations. Envy disrupts curiosity because it narrows the brain's focus to comparison and self-preservation. If someone never seems interested in your growth, ideas, or goals, and especially if they shift the conversation when you share good news, it's often not indifference, it's discomfort. They may not want to confront the emotional gap between where they are and where you are, so they disengage instead. Now, what do we do with all this information? The goal is not to confront every person we suspect of envy or deception. In fact, that would be a misuse of energy. Instead, we develop what psychologists call emotional granularity, the ability to name and distinguish complex emotions in ourselves and others. When we sharpen our perception, we become less reactive and more discerning. We learn to protect our peace without shutting people out entirely. In neuroscience, we often talk about signal-to-noise ratio. The signal is what matters, the essential data, the noise is all the distractions. In social relationships, envy and falsehood are noise. They cloud the signal of trust and authenticity. When we train ourselves to detect them early, we preserve our focus, our energy, and our emotional clarity. This is not about judgment, it's about pattern recognition. It's about seeing the full landscape of human behavior with open eyes and steady breath, because the more clearly we see, the better we choose, and the more resilient we become. And as we further explore this terrain, we must remember that envy and falsehood are not always conscious behaviors. In many cases, people don't even realize they are envious. They might believe they are acting normally, that their discomfort with your success is justified, or that their subtle sabotages are just minor grievances. That's what makes these dynamics so difficult to confront directly. They're rarely declared. Instead, they manifest in emotional avoidance, delayed responses, unacknowledged milestones, and oddly timed criticisms. The subconscious nature of these behaviors makes them even more insidious because the person enacting them may fully believe they're being supportive or neutral. That's why it becomes your responsibility not to fix or change them, but to recognize the truth of the relationship dynamic and act accordingly. One often overlooked dimension of envy is its connection to scarcity mindset. When someone views success as a limited resource, when they believe that your progress somehow subtracts from theirs, they're more likely to respond to you with resentment rather than encouragement. This isn't just a philosophical stance, it's neurobiological. The brain's threat detection systems, including the amygdala and insular cortex, light up when someone perceives themselves as falling behind or losing status. So what appears on the surface as indifference or coldness may actually be their nervous system responding to a perceived loss. This reaction can be intense, especially in environments that emphasize competition, comparison, or hierarchical validation, like workplaces, family systems, or tight social circles. These internal comparisons often create a narrative distortion in the envious person's mind. They begin to view you not as a person with your own challenges and efforts, but as a symbol of what they lack. This psychological projection is dangerous because it dehumanizes you. It turns your success into a trigger rather than a shared experience. People who fall into this pattern might begin minimizing your efforts, questioning your motives, or rewriting the story of how you got where you are. They'll say things like you always get things handed to you, or people like you never struggle. These comments aren't really about you. They're about their inability to reconcile their own perceived stagnation with your momentum, and unless they do the internal work to shift from a scarcity to an abundance mindset, their perception of you will always be tainted by quiet resentment. Now, let's not forget that falsehood often travels alongside envy, because if someone feels threatened by your presence, they'll instinctively try to manipulate how you see them. This can include excessive flattery, performative empathy, or strategic bonding, where they mirror your beliefs and values in order to gain access to your world. This kind of falsehood is especially dangerous because it can create an illusion of closeness that blinds you to their true motives. The brain's reward system, particularly the release of oxytocin during connection and bonding, makes it easy to trust those who appear to affirm us. But you must learn to differentiate between those who affirm you because they admire you, and those who do so because they want proximity to your power, status, or energy. When someone's admiration feels overly rehearsed or transactional, when they seem too quick to agree, too eager to be included, too fast to form a bond, it's important to pause. Genuine relationships develop through shared values, tested experiences, and time. If someone jumps too many steps too quickly, especially when you're ascending in your life, it's worth asking what their true interest might be. Often, it's not you. It's what being near you makes them feel about themselves. Falsehood born from envy wants closeness, not out of love or respect, but out of a desire to borrow your light. This is where boundaries become essential. Boundaries are not about punishing others or withdrawing love. They're about regulating access to your mental, emotional, and spiritual bandwidth. When you start recognizing the presence of envy and falsehood, you must respond not by accusing, but by adjusting. You don't need to announce your boundaries. You demonstrate them through delayed responses, limited exposure, and a refusal to share your inner world with those who have proven unsafe. In neuroscience, we understand that the brain seeks patterns to determine safety. When someone repeatedly disrupts your peace, downplays your growth, or injects negativity into your success, your nervous system learns to associate them with stress. Listen to that data. Your discomfort is not an overreaction. It's an internal alarm system. Another point of importance is energetic reciprocity. Healthy relationships function like neural networks. There's give and take, input and output. There's a rhythm of sharing and support that flows organically. But when someone harbors envy or operates from falsehood, that rhythm is broken. They might extract your energy, your time, ideas, or emotional labor without giving anything back. They might only show up when they need something, or only respond when the conversation centers on them. Over time, these imbalances drain you, and the most deceptive part is that this kind of dynamic often masquerades as closeness. They might insist that you're their best friend, their safe space, their person. But real connection isn't measured by declarations. It's measured by presence, consistency, and mutual nourishment. And if the nourishment only flows in one direction, it's not a relationship, it's a performance. It's also essential to notice how someone reacts when you set a boundary or express a need. Envy and falsehood cannot coexist with honest dialogue. When you express discomfort, disappointment, or distance, the person operating from envy will likely respond with defensiveness, guilt, tripping, or subtle retaliation. This is because your boundary disrupts their access to you, and more importantly, disrupts their illusion of control or superiority. On the other hand, a person rooted in authenticity, even if they feel challenged, will respond with curiosity, humility, and an effort to understand. This difference in response reveals the underlying emotional architecture of the relationship. It tells you who is actually invested in mutual growth and who is simply invested in the benefits of your presence. Sometimes one of the clearest signs of envy is silence, not anger, not conflict, just withdrawal. When someone disappears during your wins, minimizes your transformation, or offers radio silence when you're celebrating, you're experiencing a form of emotional neglect. And that neglect isn't accidental, it's a response to internal discomfort. Their silence speaks volumes. It says, I can't support you because I feel diminished by your success. It says, I want connection, but only if it keeps me comfortable. This kind of conditional presence is perhaps the most painful to encounter, especially when it comes from someone you believed was in your corner, but ignoring it doesn't make it disappear. Acknowledging it, however, within yourself, is a step toward emotional clarity. You'll also want to watch how people respond to your vulnerability. A truly supportive person honors your lows as much as your highs, but someone operating from falsehood will use your vulnerability as leverage later. They'll bring up your past struggles in moments designed to humble you or remind you of your flaws. They might act like they were there for you, but weaponize that support when the power dynamic shifts. This is a sign they were never truly showing up for you. They were investing in emotional currency they could use later to assert dominance or control. This kind of manipulation is subtle, but it's deeply rooted in envy. Because when someone sees you rising, they might feel the need to bring up your lowest points, not out of care, but out of insecurity. In many cases, falsehood is accompanied by performative loyalty. These are the people who claim to always have your back, but only in ways that are visible to others. They're loud in public, but silent in private. They might comment supportively on your posts, but ignore your texts. They might speak highly of you to others, but avoid direct connection. Their loyalty is contingent on optics, not intimacy. This behavior often stems from a desire to remain adjacent to your growth without doing the emotional work required to sustain a real bond. From a psychological standpoint, this is an external validation strategy. They want to be associated with your success without confronting the discomfort it brings up in their own life. And finally, perhaps one of the most telling signs of envy and falsehood is the erosion of your own confidence when you're around someone. If after every interaction you feel smaller, more confused, less certain, or emotionally drained, that's not random. Your body is picking up on dissonance, your nervous system is reacting to unspoken competition, microaggressions, or quiet judgments. Don't gaslight yourself into believing you're imagining it. Emotional data is real. We are wired to detect tension even when it's not verbalized, and over time, if you stay in proximity to that tension, it will start to internalize as self-doubt. This is how powerful and dangerous these dynamics can be. What this all comes down to is awareness of patterns of energy, of how people make you feel consistently over time, not just when things are neutral, but when you're winning, when you're growing, when you're shifting. Because the people who truly love and respect you won't be shaken by your evolution. They won't withdraw, manipulate, or sabotage. They'll adapt. They'll grow with you. They'll see your light and reflect it back, not try to dim it. So when it comes to recognizing envy and falsehood in others, it's not about labeling people or cutting ties impulsively. It's about becoming so deeply attuned to your own energy, values, and intuition that you naturally gravitate toward authenticity and naturally distance yourself from anything that threatens your peace. You owe it to yourself to walk with people who clap with full hearts, speak with clear truth, and stand beside you whether you're climbing or falling. Anything less than that isn't friendship, it's performance. And your nervous system deserves better. In conclusion, recognizing envy and falsehood in others is less about judgment and more about discernment. It requires tuning into your nervous system, trusting the data of your emotional responses, and watching for patterns that reveal deeper truths about human behavior. When someone consistently drains your energy, distorts your reality, or disrupts your peace, you're not obligated to stay in that dynamic, no matter how long you've known them or how much history you share. Relationships, like the brain itself, are plastic. They can grow, rewire, or be pruned when they no longer serve your health. The goal isn't to eliminate every challenging person from your life, but to build internal clarity so you know where to invest your trust, your time, and your vulnerability. That kind of clarity isn't just emotional intelligence, it's biological self-preservation. And in a world filled with noise, it's one of the most powerful tools you have.